The Weekly Adirondack, newspaper of the Old Forge Inlet area, presents Adirondack Journal.
Good morning. I'm Gary Van Riper. Welcome to Adirondack Journal. I can't wait for you to meet this week's guest, syndicated columnist Andy Flynn. Andy's column, Adirondack Attic, appears in newspapers throughout the Adirondack Park, including right here in Old Forge.
I write the Adirondack Attic newspaper column. It features an artifact a week from the Adirondack Museum's collection. The museum is in Blue Mountain Lake, about 35 miles north of Old Forge. And what inspired me to write this column was my love for history, my love for writing, and I just married the both of them. So I get to tell the stories behind the artifacts at the museum, but they're human stories, stories about Adirondack life. Well, I was inspired by a program on television on A&E where Joan London was going through the Smithsonian Institution museums, and she was going through the warehouses. So she was seeing all sorts of artifacts that were in storage, and she said something that struck me. She said, these artifacts would never be on display. I thought, what a shame. We have artifacts in the Adirondack Museum that would never be on display. So if I didn't tell those stories behind these artifacts, nobody would see them. Nobody would know these human history stories about our heritage in the Adirondacks. I guess it's a different history lesson for me every week, and I get to share that history lesson with everybody else. So that's what I really enjoy about it. I get to share what I do and what I love, and then people seem to enjoy it. There was one artifact that I wrote in 2007. It was a water cooler. It was a stoneware jug. It was in the bottom shelf, tucked away in the shadows, and it was pretty large, you know, and it had a Utica business on the front of it, and it said London Whiskey Company or something. It came from Long Lake, but it was stoneware that came from Utica. So it's part of the Mohawk Valley, you know, culture and heritage, but you know, the heritage of the Adirondacks as well, because stoneware was widely used throughout the Adirondacks in the 18th century. Here's an example of an artifact I found at the Adirondack Museum in storage, so folks wouldn't necessarily know it's there. And this is a brakeman's hat from the New York Central. It was owned by a gentleman in Tupper Lake, Charles Laramie, and he worked for the New York Central for 46 years, from 1911 to 1957. And he started working in the railroad yards, then he was a brakeman and then a conductor. And inside you can see his name. And so this was donated recently to the museum. Yeah, the best experiences for me is when I find an object that the curators don't know much about, and I find just a nugget of information that they have no clue about, and I go back to them and say, look what I found. And they say, wow, you found that? Well, they don't really get that excited, but but they find interest in it, and I can add that information to the museum's files. Then I've contributed to Adirondack history as sort of being, you know, the Indiana Jones in the basement, sort of.
You can pick up collections of Andy's columns in any one of 4 volumes of Adirondack Attic, or you can subscribe like I do to the Weekly Adirondack and read Andy's column every single week and add another page to your own Adirondack Journal.